The gunshot echoed through the Manhattan subway, and a 15-year-old boy calmly watched a man collapse at his feet. That boy was Willie Bosket. He was born on December 9, 1962, in Harlem, New York. His childhood was full of chaos long before he even understood what was happening around him. His father, Willie Sr., was already locked up for taking the lives of two men in South Carolina. His mother tried to raise him alone, but often struggled to control him. From the very beginning, Willie's world was shaped by neglect and constant exposure to aggressiveness. It seemed almost certain that he would follow the same path as his father. As a child, Willie was restless, disruptive, and deeply troubled. He spent much of his early life in juvenile facilities, not because of one or two mistakes, but because of a long pattern of dangerous behavior. He was only 9 when he was first sent away after stealing and setting fires. While other kids his age were focused on school or playground games, Willie had already become well known to local officers. His file grew so quickly that social workers began calling him one of the most dangerous children they had ever handled. When he was released as a teenager, he came back not calmer, but angrier and more resentful. New York in the late 1970s was already struggling with high levels of turmoil, and Willie wanted to make his presence felt in the most destructive way. On March 19, 1978, just 3 months after turning 15, he carried out an act that made him one of the youngest people to terrify the city's subway system. It started when he boarded a Manhattan train with a stolen gun. He confronted a man named Noel Perez, an immigrant from the Dominican Republic who had been working hard to support his family. Willie demanded money, and when Noel hesitated, Willie fired. Noel lost his life instantly. Only hours later, Willie struck again. He entered another subway train and targeted a man named Moises Perez, who had no relation to Noel. Once again, the 15-year-old aimed and shot. Moises passed immediately. 2 lives were gone within a single day, all at the hands of someone who was barely in high school. But he didn't stop there. Over the next week, he shot another man in the subway who barely survived. He also tried to rob several others. For Willie, it wasn't only about the money. It was about power, control, and the thrill. Later, he even admitted that taking lives gave him a rush that nothing else ever could. This was not a single desperate act. It was something he embraced as part of who he was. So how was he caught? After the subway spree, witnesses described him to authorities. Officers quickly tracked him down and made an arrest. During questioning, Willie didn't try to deny anything. He admitted to everything with a coldness that shocked investigators. He even said, "I like to do it." Those words weren't meant to impress or scare anyone. He truly meant them. Why did he feel this way? Many people pointed to his family history. His father had already taken lives. His grandfather also had a harmful past. His home life was unstable. The cycle of brutality was there for generations. Still, many argued that plenty of children grew up in poverty or without fathers and didn't turn to such extreme paths. Willie was different, and everyone who met him seemed to know it. Now the legal system faced a huge problem. Willie was only 15. At the time, New York law said the most a young offender could face was 5 years in a youth facility, no matter what they had done. That meant this teenager, who had taken the lives of 2 men, could walk free before his 21st birthday. The thought terrified the public. Could the city allow someone like Willie Bosket back onto the streets after just a few years? When his trial began, the evidence was overwhelming. His confession alone was enough. In June 1978, Willie was found guilty. But because of his age, the maximum sentence was 5 years in a youth facility. When the sentence was read, Willie smiled. He even bragged to guards and other inmates that he would soon be free and would do it again. He wasn't afraid of the system. He knew it couldn't keep him locked away for long. His words spread across New York like a warning. He even said, "I could do this to 100 people and still get out." That statement alone was enough to spark outrage and fear. The public demanded action. Lawmakers quickly changed legislation so that young people as young as 13 could be tried as adults for extreme acts. This became known as the Willie Bosket Law. In this way, a single teenager forced the state of New York to reshape its entire justice system. True to his word, Willie never reformed. After serving his juvenile sentence, he was released at 21. Within weeks, he committed new harmful acts. He robbed people, harmed others, and was once again charged. But this time, as an adult, the law could fully punish him. In 1989, he was sentenced to 3 consecutive terms of 25 years to life for arson, armed theft, and aggressive behavior against others. Even in prison, he could not stop. He harmed guards, set fires, and even used sharp objects against staff. Each time, his sentence grew longer. He received another 25 years for harming a guard, and another long term for setting fire to his cell. Today, his total sentence adds up to more than 100 years. He is housed in solitary confinement at Shawangunk Correctional Facility in New York, where he is expected to remain for the rest of his life. When asked later about his past, he never showed regret. He often said that such behavior was simply part of him, something he couldn't change. "I have no regrets," he once stated. "If I could, I'd do it again." Today, Willie Bosket is 62 years old. He is still in solitary, still viewed as one of the most dangerous men in New York's prison system. The next victim was just 18, full of ambition and dreams, but within minutes, her life was taken, and a child barely out of middle school was at the center of it. Luciano Lewis was born and raised in New York. He grew up in Harlem, surrounded by the same pressures many young people in the city face. His childhood did not make headlines, and little is known about his family life. What is known is that he grew up in an environment where danger was never far away. By the time he was 14, he was not just another boy walking through the neighborhood. He was already heading toward choices that would later put his name in the news. In December of 2019, New York City was shaken by the loss of Tessa Majors. She was just 18, a freshman at Barnard College. She had come to the city with big dreams and was ready to start her college journey. Her life ended in Morningside Park. Luciano Lewis, along with 2 other boys, was at the center of this case. At only 14, Lewis was still a child by law, but what happened that night would define his life forever. It started with what they called a robbery spree. Lewis, his friend Rashawn Weaver, also 14, and another boy, only 13, decided to go into Morningside Park. Their plan was simple to them. They wanted to take something from someone. Why? For a phone, some money, or just a thrill? It was not about need. It was about choice and reckless excitement. That night, they crossed paths with Tessa Majors. She was walking through the park after dark. She was full of ambition and had her entire future ahead of her. The boys saw her as a target. Weaver was the one who brought a sharp weapon. Lewis held Tessa in a headlock during the struggle, making it hard for her to get away. Weaver used the weapon while the third boy acted as lookout. Tessa fought back, even biting one of them, but it was too much. Wounded, she climbed a staircase, but collapsed soon after. She did not survive, leaving behind her family and a grieving campus community. So how did it come to this? A 14-year-old boy, barely out of middle school, standing at the center of a case that shocked the entire city. It came down to choices. Choices made in one night that could never be undone. The response from authorities was quick. Within days, the teenagers were identified. The youngest boy, just 13, was the first to be taken in. He gave investigators the names of Lewis and Weaver. Surveillance cameras and phone records confirmed their connection to the scene. Lewis was arrested, and the case moved quickly because of the public outrage. Lewis admitted to what he did. He said he went into the park planning to take something from someone. He admitted he held Tessa while Weaver used the sharp tool. His confession was straightforward and left no doubt about his involvement. When the case reached the courtroom, emotions were heavy. By 2021, Lewis was 16 when he faced the judge. The events of that night were explained again in detail. Prosecutors described the theft attempt, the struggle, and Tessa's desperate effort to escape. The defense pointed to his age, his lack of maturity, and the influences around him. But the court had to ask, could age erase the harm caused? Could it undo the pain left behind? During sentencing, Lewis spoke. He kept his words short but carried regret. He said, "I apologize for my actions. I know what I did was wrong, and I wish I could take it back." His final words showed remorse, but they could not change what had already happened. The judge listened but gave a firm sentence. Lewis received 9 years to life in prison. the maximum allowed for his age. This meant he would spend his late teens and 20s behind bars, with the chance of release only if parole boards later agreed. Weaver, the one who held the weapon, was sentenced to 14 years to life. The youngest, because of his age and cooperation, was sent to juvenile detention until he turned 18. The next case began with 4 cars and a gang's mistake, but it ended with a tragedy New York still remembers. Manuel Rivera was one of 5 young men found guilty by a Bronx jury in June of 2019. They were convicted for ending the life of 15-year-old Lisandro Junior Feliz's life. Rivera's story, his role in what happened, the trial, and the sentence he received show how gang life shaped a tragedy in a New York neighborhood. Not much is publicly known about Rivera's childhood or family. Most records describe his ties to the gang scene in the Bronx. On June 20th, 2018, Rivera was 18 years old. He was connected to a Dominican street group called the Trinitarios. Within this group, he was linked to a section known as Los Sures. The Trinitarios operate in New York with different local splits and territorial subgroups. That summer night, Junior left his home to meet a friend. He carried $5 with him to repay someone. While outside, he noticed 4 cars trailing him. Scared, he ran. What happened next was caught on security cameras and cell phone recordings. These clips later became key pieces in court. Junior ran into a small shop on Bathgate Avenue and East 183rd Street in the Belmont area of the Bronx. He begged for protection. At first, the shop owner was unsure what to do, but eventually let Junior hide behind the counter. One of the men, however, thought he recognized Junior and pulled him back outside. Outside, more young men were waiting. They used large, sharp tools and struck him several times. The video showed Junior trying to escape afterward. He stumbled and made it near a hospital entrance. Sadly, he collapsed there, unable to survive his injuries. Why was he targeted? Prosecutors explained that it was due to mistaken identity. The group thought Junior belonged to a rival section of the Trinitarios called Sunset. They believed he was part of that side, but he was not involved in gang life at all. This mistake cost him his life, and prosecutors made clear that Junior had no gang ties whatsoever. Rivera was shown in court as being directly involved in the chase and the use of sharp tools. He and his co-defendants faced charges of first and second-degree unlawful taking of life, conspiracy, and gang-related conduct. Prosecutors described how the group had gathered in cars, hunted Junior, cornered him in the shop, dragged him out, and carried out the act. People testified in court. Some were neighbors who had seen everything from their windows. Surveillance clips were shown frame by frame. A woman named Tamika Jones said she saw what happened from her apartment window and screamed for Junior to run. The defense argued that many of the wounds were shallow and that only one deep cut caused Junior to lose his life. They claimed the group had not meant to end him, but only to injure. Prosecutors disagreed. They showed slowed-down video loops highlighting each hand motion with the sharp tool. They argued that Junior had been hurt in a way that went beyond simple injury. The jury had to decide whether this was planned in advance and carried out with cruelty. Their decision came on June 14, 2019. Rivera, along with Jonaiki Martinez Estrella, Elvin Garcia, Jose Muniz, and Antonio Rodriguez Hernandez, was found guilty. They were convicted of first and second-degree unlawful taking of life, conspiracy, and gang conduct. The court accepted that Junior had extremely suffered. He was not just struck. This was part of the reason the verdict included first-degree charges. At sentencing, Rivera received 23 years to life in prison for the unlawful taking of life charges. He also received additional maximum terms of up to 15 years for conspiracy and gang crime. His sentence was lighter than some of the others because of his younger age. Some of the co-defendants were sentenced to 25 years to life or more. Rivera did not face a capital punishment sentence. New York does not have the capital penalty, so there were no last words, last meal, or final procedures. His punishment is long-term imprisonment. One of the most heartbreaking parts of the case is what Junior himself said in his final moments. Witnesses shared that, as he lay wounded, he asked for water. That small request has been remembered in court and in news coverage ever since. Rivera's time in custody has been dangerous as well. While being held at Rikers Island in December of 2018, before his trial, Rivera was cut on the face. Reports said the incident came from a rival gang member inside the jail. That moment showed the kind of risks he would continue to face in prison. Now, what drives a 14-year-old to an act so extreme that a judge would call it depraved and unimaginable? And if you find stories like these important, consider subscribing. He was only 14 when his name became tied to one of Rochester's most shocking cases. The community could not understand how someone so young could be involved in something so cruel. Very little is known about his early years, his family, or his upbringing. Almost all the public reporting focused only on the case, the investigation, the trial, and the sentencing. On March 12, 2021, emergency crews rushed to an apartment on Lyle Avenue in Rochester. Inside, 53-year-old Stephen Amenhauser was sitting in a chair. Investigators later learned that he had been covered with a flammable liquid and set on fire. He managed to run outside while flames covered his body. People nearby tried desperately to put out the fire. First responders arrived quickly and took him to Strong Memorial Hospital. Doctors reported that he had severe burns over about 70% of his body. He fought for his life for several days but passed away on March 16, 2021. Not long after, 2 teenagers were taken into custody. They were identified as Adriel Riley, who was 14, and Xavier Perry, who was 16. Prosecutors stated that the two had deliberately started the fire inside Amenhauser's apartment. Why did this happen? According to the prosecution, Riley's intention was to end Amenhauser's life by using fire. The district attorney's office described the act as cruel and said it showed no regard for human life. They argued that this was not an accident, but something done on purpose. But was there ever a clear motive? Public reporting did not provide one. No explanations like money issues, revenge, or disputes were ever highlighted. Instead, the focus remained on the physical evidence, the forensic reports, and the details of what happened inside the apartment. Some defense statements suggested confusion or denial, but no strong motive was ever publicly confirmed. During the trial, the court heard testimony from fire investigators, police, and forensic experts. Prosecutors showed that Riley had both the tools and the chance to carry it out. They argued it was not a mistake, but something thought out in advance. The defense team pushed back. They questioned the evidence and raised doubts about intent. They even suggested the fire might have been impulsive instead of planned. Since Riley's case was handled in a bench trial, the judge alone decided the outcome. In the end, Riley was found guilty of second-degree unlawful taking of life and of having a weapon illegally. He was found not guilty of the arson charge and was also cleared of a second count of second-degree unlawful taking of life. Judge Stacey Romeo presided over the case in the criminal youth part of family court. She accepted the prosecution's view that Riley had meant to take Amenhauser's life. She said setting someone on fire inside their own apartment showed planning and left little doubt about intent. On April 19, 2023, Judge Romeo gave Riley the maximum sentence allowed for his age. He received 15 years to life in state prison. He was also given another sentence of 2¼ to 7 years for the weapon charge, which would run at the same time. In court, prosecutors called the act depraved and unimaginable. Riley's family and supporters strongly disagreed. His godmother publicly said, "He is innocent. You cannot say he took someone's life by setting them on fire and then also say he is not guilty of arson. He is going to come home. Free AJ." Up next are 2 brothers who went to a party to celebrate. But by the end of the night, only one person's jealousy decided their fate. Jose Matias's name comes up in one of the most disturbing cases involving a teenager in the Bronx during the early 1990s. Court records and legal documents show the story of a young man whose actions at a party took the lives of 2 brothers and created decades of court battles. He was born around 1976. His exact birth date is not public. That made him 16 years old when the events happened. Very little is known about his family or his early childhood. Most of the information we have is about what happened at the party, his trial, and the long path of appeals that followed. On February 22, 1992, a birthday celebration was taking place in a Bronx apartment. The party was for a girl named Melissa Del Moral, who was turning 16. Among the guests were her boyfriend, 17-year-old Osvaldo Ozzy Lucero, and his older brother, 21-year-old Jacinto J. Lucero. At the same time, Jose Matias, also 16, had become strongly attached to Melissa. She did not feel the same way about him. Melissa and Osvaldo had briefly broken up, but then got back together. Matias took this as rejection, and his feelings turned into jealousy. That night, Matias came to the party carrying a small pistol. Witnesses later said they saw him quietly checking, reloading, and preparing the weapon. As the night went on, he finally pulled it out and opened fire. He first aimed at Osvaldo and shot him in the back of the head. Osvaldo collapsed immediately. Then he turned toward Jacinto, who was in the small kitchen. Jacinto tried to crawl away, but Matias shot him in the chest. Even after Osvaldo had already been shot, Matias kept pressing the trigger. Witnesses described him as calm and determined, continuing to fire even when people were panicking and trying to escape. When questioned by the police, Matias admitted what he had done. He gave both a spoken and written statement. He also admitted that he threw away the weapon afterward. Ballistics testing later proved that the bullets matched the gun he carried. Several eyewitnesses confirmed they saw him shoot. The court later said his actions showed clear planning, not a sudden or reckless outburst. The main reason behind it, according to the court, was jealousy. He believed Melissa had chosen Osvaldo over him, but the way he acted suggested more than just hurt feelings. It showed anger, control, and a lack of hesitation. Matias was formally charged in Bronx County under indictment number 1832 of 92. He faced 2 counts of second-degree unlawful taking of life, 1 count of weapon possession, and 1 count of reckless endangerment. His trial was held before a jury. On May 9, 1994, he was found guilty on both life-taking charges and on the weapons charge. On June 2, 1994, Justice Stephen L. Barrett sentenced him. For each life-taking count, Matias received 25 years to life, to be served one after the other. For the weapons charge, he received 5 to 15 years, to be served at the same time as the other sentences. In total, this meant 50 years to life in prison. His lawyer argued that he was young and had no prior record. The defense said this was a one-time act and asked the judge to show mercy, but the court refused. The judge said the act was unusually cold, even for a county used to hardship. He pointed out that the Lucero brothers were unarmed and had bright futures ahead of them. One was about to join the Marines, and the other was planning to attend college. The judge even mentioned how one of the brothers had said, "We come in peace," right before being shot, using this moment to show how heartless the act was. Matias appealed many times over the years. In 1997, an appellate court upheld the conviction. In 2001, his federal habeas petition was denied. In 2006, he tried again, arguing his lawyer was ineffective. That request was also denied in 2007. In 2020, he filed another motion, saying that his sentence was too harsh for someone who was only 16 at the time. The Bronx court rejected that claim. In 2022, the appellate division also agreed with the lower court, saying his sentence was not unconstitutional, so the outcome remains the same. Jose Matias stands convicted on 2 counts of second-degree life-taking and 1 count of weapon possession. His sentence is 2 consecutive terms of 25 years to life, plus a concurrent weapons term, which means a total of 50 years to life in prison. The next teen did something out of boredom, but the act left one officer lifeless and another scarred for life. Marcel Dockery was a teenager living in the Coney Island section of Brooklyn, New York. His exact birth date is not publicly reported. He grew up in a public housing building at 2007 Surf Avenue. There is little information about his family background. What is known is that he lived in a multi-family building. On the day of the incident, some reports say he was standing in the hallway near his cousin's apartments. There are not many details about his childhood or his parents. What is clear is that he was raised in a crowded city environment, where many young people often spent time in the hallways of their buildings. On April 6, 2014, when he was 16 years old, Dockery started a fire that ended in tragedy. He used a lighter to set the corner of a mattress on fire. The mattress was propped up in a common hallway of his building. His own words, recorded later and played during his trial, explained why he did it. Dockery said he was bored while waiting for his cousins to open their door. "I was just bored of waiting, so I walked down and I started burning the edge of the mattress," he told police in a taped video. He also said he never thought the fire would spread, or that anyone would lose their life because of it. The question in court was whether he understood the danger. Prosecutors argued that he should have known how dangerous it was to light something inside a hallway. The defense claimed that it was a reckless act, but not one meant to hurt anyone. Dockery himself said he planned to blow out the flame before it grew, but surveillance footage and forensic evidence showed otherwise. Once the mattress caught fire, the blaze spread quickly. Smoke filled the hallway and stairwell. Officers Dennis Guerra and Rosa Rodriguez responded to the call. When they entered the building, They were quickly overcome by smoke and carbon monoxide. The hallway was filled with dark fumes, making it nearly impossible to see. Rodriguez later testified that as soon as the doors opened, they were both choked by thick smoke. She said she held onto Guerra's shoulder in desperation as they tried to find their way through the darkness. Officer Guerra suffered severe injuries from the smoke. Despite efforts to save him, he passed away a few days later. His final radio call for help was described in court. 85, 85, he yelled. Rodriguez survived but was left with permanent lung damage. She testified that she can no longer walk long distances, play with her children as before, and may one day need a lung transplant. In May 2016, when Dockery was 18, the jury in Brooklyn Supreme Court reached a verdict. He was found guilty of second-degree homicide, first-degree bodily harm, and fourth-degree arson. The jury took about 4 hours to decide. Some jurors later explained that they believed Dockery had not meant to hurt anyone. They hoped the judge would show some leniency. At sentencing on June 14, 2016, Dockery was given 19 years to life for the top charge. He also received 15 years for the harm and 1 1/3 years for the arson. These sentences would all run at the same time. Prosecutors had asked for 25 years to life, but the judge gave 19 to life instead. During the hearing, emotional letters from Officer Guerra's family were read in court. One came from his son, who wrote, "Your boredom took away a hero." Guerra's widow described watching her husband slowly fade away in the hospital. She said their young son could not sleep at night unless he heard his father's voice. Dockery himself chose to remain silent at the sentencing. His lawyer said that they would appeal and continued to argue that Dockery was innocent. In the next case, what began as an ordinary night of babysitting turned into one of Erie County's darkest cases. He was a teenager whose name shocked many after one tragic night. Dylan Shoemaker was born around 1996 or 1997. Reports do not show an exact birth date. He grew up in Springville, New York, which is in Erie County. Not much is known in detail about his family life. Some media outlets mentioned that he grew up without much parental guidance. Others reported that he struggled with mental health challenges. In March of 2013, Dylan was still a teenager. He was asked to watch his girlfriend's children. One of them was 23-month-old Austin Smith. On the night of March 19, 2013, his girlfriend left for work. She trusted Dylan to babysit Austin and his baby sibling. What started as a normal babysitting job ended very differently. Later that night, Dylan called 911. He said that Austin was unresponsive. Emergency responders rushed to the home. But when they arrived, they noticed something was wrong. The child's body had many bruises. There were also serious injuries to his head. Deputies and paramedics quickly noticed that Dylan's story did not match what they were seeing. He had said the toddler had fallen or suddenly stopped responding, but the injuries were too severe for that explanation. Doctors later confirmed through medical testing that Austin's passing was caused by heavy blows to the head. Investigators determined that Dylan had struck him multiple times over a period of time. In court, Dylan admitted that he hit Austin several times while babysitting. He said he lost his cool, but he insisted he had not meant for the child to lose his life. Why would this happen? Court testimony suggested that Dylan became frustrated. Austin would not stop crying. Dylan snapped under the stress. The prosecution argued that Dylan acted with clear intent to cause serious harm. The defense argued that he was immature, very young, and did not truly understand the full weight of his actions. When Dylan first appeared in court, he entered a not guilty plea. The charges included second-degree unlawful taking of life and first-degree serious injury. The case went to trial. The prosecution presented strong evidence. They showed medical records. They explained that the bruises and head injuries were not consistent with an accident. They also played Dylan's own recorded phone calls. In one call to his mother, Dylan said, "I'm a 16-year-old blonde. Probably all I have to do is cry and they're going to feel sorry for me." The jury listened to all the evidence. In December 2013, they found him guilty of second-degree unlawful taking of life. In January 2014, the judge handed down the sentence. The judge considered his age, the seriousness of what happened, and the arguments from both sides. The judge said Dylan showed himself to be manipulative. He said Dylan understood right from wrong. He ruled that the severity of what happened required full accountability. Dylan was given the maximum punishment allowed by law, 25 years to life in prison. But the case did not end there. Dylan appealed the decision. The appellate division reviewed his background. They noted his young age, lack of previous records, and his mental health history. they decided the punishment of 25 years to life was too harsh. In February 2016, they reduced the sentence to 18 years to life. This means Dylan will serve at least 18 years before he can even request parole. If a parole board agrees, he could be released after that period. But if they deny him, he could remain in prison for life. One of the most unforgettable pieces of this case is still that recorded call. His words, "I'm a 16-year-old blonde. Probably all I have to do is cry and they're going to feel sorry for me," continue to echo. They were not words of regret. Instead, they sounded like calculation. Neighbors saw the next offender as shy, yet inside, he was planning something that would take 10 lives in minutes. Peyton S. Gendron grew up in a quiet, mostly white town, more than 3 hours from Buffalo. He was 18 years old. Neighbors remembered him as shy. His parents worked in technical jobs. He had signed up for classes at a local community college. On May 14, 2022, everything changed. That quiet image hid something he had been building for months. He planned, wrote about, and practiced an act in private long before that day. He drove to Tops Friendly Market on Jefferson Avenue, a store in a mostly black neighborhood. He wore body armor and a helmet with a camera attached. He carried an AR-15 style rifle and several large capacity magazines. He even streamed part of what happened live. In under 2 minutes, 10 people lost their lives, and 3 more were injured. The people chosen were not random. Investigators later said the act was motivated by race. When authorities searched deeper, they found his preparation. He left behind a racist manifesto. His online history showed months of study and posts where he discussed the replacement theory, an extremist idea that suggests demographic change is a threat to white people. He had thought about other locations too. He even visited Buffalo earlier to scout the store. His weapon was chosen for its power. His plan was written out in detail. This was not a sudden outburst. It was targeted, and it was motivated by hate. Federal and local prosecutors agreed it was a case of domestic terrorism. Here is how it unfolded. In the early afternoon, he parked outside the store. He fired on people in the parking lot before stepping inside. He wore protective gear and recorded the whole act. On the live stream, he was heard saying that he was going for it. Many of the people harmed were older shoppers who came to that store often. One of the first to confront him was Aaron Salter Jr., a retired officer working as a security guard. Salter tried to stop him but was shot and did not survive. Witnesses later described the panic and confusion. Investigators used security video, eyewitness accounts, and evidence from his car to piece together the sequence. Why did he do it? Investigators said it was extremist beliefs absorbed online. He believed in the replacement theory and felt the behavior was justified. He left a manifesto where he mentioned past attackers with similar motives. Prosecutors used those writings as proof that his actions were fueled by hate. After his arrest, he faced both state and federal charges. In New York State Court, he was charged with multiple counts including domestic terrorism, motivated by hate, and weapons offenses. In February 2023, after pleading guilty, he appeared at his sentencing. Families of the victims filled the courtroom. Some spoke directly to him, describing the damage he had caused. Emotions were so strong that at one point, a family member lunged toward him while another was speaking. The judge imposed the harshest state sentence available, life in prison without parole. He received 1 life sentence for each person who lost their life, plus long terms for those injured. At the hearing, Gendron read a short statement. He admitted that he targeted people because they were black. He said he was sorry, and that he did not want to inspire others to follow him. For many, his words felt empty. Families called for stronger punishment. The federal case added another layer. Federal prosecutors filed separate charges, including multiple counts of hate-driven acts. The Department of Justice announced it would seek capital punishment, the first time this administration approved that step in a case like this. His lawyers asked for the trial to be moved, arguing that local jurors had seen too much coverage. The request for capital punishment also raised debate over fairness, age, and federal authority. In court, families again spoke. They shared the everyday losses, like empty chairs at dinner tables and holidays that will never feel the same. Some pointed to his online writings as clear evidence of his intent. Others wanted the system to prevent this from becoming an example for copycats. At the state sentencing, he spoke again. He said, "I am very sorry for all of the pain I forced all of the victims and their families to suffer through. I did a terrible thing that day. I shot people because they were black." Those words were reported widely, but for many they meant little compared to the harm done. He remains in custody. His federal trial could still bring capital punishment, raising questions about final procedures and whether the system should impose the harshest punishment available. In the next case, what began as a break-in quickly turned into tragedy. and a driver who never pulled the trigger was held responsible. Jacob Rouse's name is not one that many people know. He was not someone with a long history of wrongdoing. He had never been involved in any serious cases before. But his life changed completely because of one night in Rochester, New York. He was the driver for his friends during a break-in, and that decision tied him to what happened inside the house. Under New York's felony homicide law, he was held responsible for a life that was lost, even though he was not the one who fired the weapon. Jacob grew up in Rochester with his mother, Elizabeth Uzawaru. She raised him on her own because his father, a black man, was mostly absent from his life. Jacob lived in a mostly white neighborhood, and he often struggled with questions about identity. He had a sister named Camille and a brother named Esau. Later, in interviews, Jacob explained how his ideas about being a man were shaped. He watched television and movies where manliness was shown as dominance, control, and mistreating women. He said he took in those images and thought that was what defined a man. Despite that, Jacob managed to do well in school. He graduated high school, started college, and even joined the ROTC program. Up until the night of the break-in, he had no history of crime. On that night, Jacob sat in a blue Ford Taurus parked a block away. His job was to be the getaway driver. His 3 friends went inside the house. Their plan was simple: take property and then leave quickly. Jacob would drive them off, but things did not go as planned. Inside the house, one of his friends fired a gun. A young man named Herschel Scriven lost his life. Herschel was only 22. He was a youth pastor and a church organist in Rochester. He had no connection to the break-in. During questioning, Jacob admitted he knew what was happening. He told the authorities the truth. He confessed to being the driver. He also said that if the gun had been in his hand, he would not have pulled the trigger. But under the law, that did not matter. Why did he agree to drive that night? Jacob said he wanted to prove something to himself. He wanted to show he was man enough to take that role. He made the choice willingly and said he regretted it right away. But prosecutors saw it differently. In their eyes, anyone who joins a felony and helps carry it out is responsible if a life is lost during it. That was the center of the case. His lawyers tried to argue that Jacob's role was small. They said he never pulled the trigger and should not face such a heavy punishment. But in New York, felony homicide laws are strict. If you help in a felony where someone loses their life, you can still be charged. The state painted Jacob as part of a planned and coordinated break-in, where the risk of danger was always there. They used his confession, his statements, and other testimonies to prove his role. The judge explained to the jury that Jacob could be found guilty of second-degree taking a life under the felony law rule. Even though he never fired the gun, the jury found him guilty. On November 28, 2006, Jacob was sentenced to 22 years to life in prison. At sentencing, Jacob spoke directly to the court and to Herschel Scriven's family. He admitted his responsibility. He said, "An innocent man lost his life because of my involvement. I still see my role, my participation in it, and I see the red that was shed because of my actions." He promised to continue Herschel's work as a Christian community leader. He also remembered something Herschel's mother said to him: "I'm going to hold you to that." He said those words stayed with him. Since being incarcerated, Jacob has tried to rebuild his life. He earned an associate's degree from Genesee Community College with a perfect 4.0 GPA. He has joined faith-based programs and mentored younger people. He has avoided trouble inside prison. Supporters have even petitioned for clemency, hoping he might be given another chance one day.